Good morning.
Good morning.
Wasn't that music just amazing? Let's put our hands together for Mercedes and Mr. James. Well, I love starting out with gratitude, and the gratitude is just spilling over for me right now. And I am so grateful for the sun, for the green trees, for gentle breezes. I am so grateful for each and every one of you and for the relative ease that we had of getting here this morning and coming together and to be able to worship together. And I'm so very grateful for each person and what you've done to have this be possible, because this kind of space doesn't happen with one person alone. It happens with a community over time. And the people who came and made the coffee and who set up the AV material and just on and on and on. And so one of the reasons I wanted to do this morning is to just have an overspilling of gratitude. So what are you grateful for? And it may be something that's here in this space. It may be something that's a result of listening to the news. You know, one of the things that I've been really present to is how do we listen to breaking news without it breaking us? How do we do that? And so as we go along today, one of the things that I'll touch on again, because repetition is the first law of learning, it really, really is. As much as I've pushed back on repetition for most of my life, you know, it is the first law of learning. And so we'll come back to gratitude. How do we listen to breaking news without it breaking us? So when I put together the title for today's talk, Resilience, oh there it is, Resilience, Faith, and Radiance, I had no idea what would be going on in our world. But this idea of resilience has been with me for many months now. And it's like, what can we do to deepen our ability to be resilient? To be resilient. So to be resilience too, I mean, there's that, right? So I did what I often do, and I went to Webster's, and I looked up the word resilient. What does it mean? That's a great place to start. The capability of a strained body to recover its size and shape after deformation caused especially by compressive stress. Well, that's a lot of words. That kind of gets you going just reading that. So there's a shorter version: an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. The ability to recover. And so right now, these past several days, James Taylor has been on my mind. Fire and wind. Fire and rain. Fire and rain. You know, and so we have on the West Coast 1.4 million acres that are burning. I can't even wrap my head around that. What is 1.4 million acres? And you know, it's personal. For me, it's personal. And when our beautiful Columbia River Gorge went up in flames, it was so personal. And it's like the grief and the sadness that comes with that, right? And we've got Houston that just went through what they went through, and it's not over. I mean, here we are, just like not even knowing what's happening in Florida right now. And the folks in Houston are just getting back in their homes in some places not even that yet. So this idea of resilience is really, really important for us. How do we bounce back when things occur that are bigger than what we are? Well, now, one of the things that we know in unity, right? This is one of the early things that we learn. I'm not going to leave us here, by the way. but one of the things that we know in unity is that it's greater than appearances, right? What things appear to be today, there's something deeper underneath that we can connect with. So I want to, where do I want to do that? So I want to remind us of a story that I'll bet almost all of you have heard before. And it's okay to do stories we've heard before, right? So there's a man who had a horse ranch, and one of his horses got away. Have you heard this story before? One of his horses got away, and the townspeople came to his ranch, and they said, "Oh, it is horrible, your horse got away. Your prize stallion got away." And the man said, "Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe it's horrible, maybe it's not, right? Maybe yes, maybe no." Well, time goes on, the townspeople left, time goes on. About a week later, his prize stallion comes back, and because he's been off in the hills running around and there are wild horses out there, he brings a whole bunch of mares back with him. And the townspeople come over and they're like, "Wow, this is really good. Look what just happened." And the man who owns these says, "Maybe yes, maybe no." And what happens next is his son goes out and he begins to break these horses. He does what he needs to do to get a halter on them and, ride them and, break them so that they can be a useful, valuable horse for somebody to ride. And one of the horses tosses him off and he breaks his leg. Well, the townspeople come back. Guess what they say? "Oh, this is horrible. Your son just broke his leg." And the man says, "Maybe yes, maybe no." And so a couple weeks go by, and this little village, this little country, the country the village is in, goes to war. And so soldiers come, and they're looking for all eligible young men to be a part of the army. And because his son has a broken leg, he can't be drafted. And so the townspeople come back, "Oh, this is fabulous." And the man says, "Maybe yes, maybe no." And so what we end up on is this roller coaster ride. If what we're paying attention to is the things that are on the outside and the appearances, we're on a roller coaster ride where we're up and down and up and down. And so those of us that have been in unity for a while know to look beyond appearances. And yet there are some appearances that weigh pretty heavy on us. And what do we do with that? How do we move to a space of resilience with that? I want to read something to you. There's a man named Bob Lucan. Does anybody know him? He writes on Facebook a lot. He comes out of New Thought. And I always see a lot of folks I know out there liking his stuff. So I wondered if anybody in here was that. But he lives in Florida. And he's one of the people who hunkered down. He's staying in his home. And he's going to be one of the first responders. So he's all lined up that once the wind goes through, he'll be over at the hospital helping people who need help. This is what he said 2 days ago. "Who knows what the wind will bring? On the outside is a mighty force. On the inside, it is an invitation to examine life, its meaning, and its value. On the outside, it screams and howls, biting everything in its path. On the inside, It opens hearts and souls, imploring them to connect and love each other. On the outside, it challenges our values, threatening to take all the things we think we must have to live. On the inside, it demands we look at the true cost of the life we are living. The wind is no friend of stuff or status. The mighty wind does not bow to the left or right of political opinion. The wind has no favorite god or religion. The mighty wind awakens the sleeping hero, the way shower, and the dreamer. The wind can destroy the strong and lift up the weak. It can undo hate and tear down the oldest of walls. The wind is a destroyer of indifference and sideline living. The mighty wind shows us we are all children playing in a rented sandbox. Today, like every day, will pass. What will be lost and found is still a mystery. If all goes well, we each will find a bit more of ourselves than we lose, and we will be grateful for what we have. That's by Bob Lukin 2 days ago. If all goes well, we each will find a bit more of ourselves than we lose, and we will be grateful for what we have. Isn't that fitting for resilience? So a little over a week ago, I was watching something that was live stream, and it was filmed at Unity of Houston. And it was immediately after Harvey had gone through. And it was the very first time that the people in the congregation had come back together. And Michael Gott is the soon-to-be senior minister. Many of you probably know Howard Caesar. I think this Sunday is his celebration, last Sunday there. Michael Gott is coming in. And so Michael was there that Wednesday evening, and they had the music and they had the announcements. And then he did something that I thought was absolutely brilliant. He walked into the congregation with the microphone. And he said, "We need to talk. It's so important that we share what our experiences have been. That we can do this in a place of safety and of love and of non-judgmental experience with one another, and to really be heard, because there's a lot that's moving through us right now." I want you to hear this, because I've been in Unity churches, and I'm not saying here, but I've been in Unity churches where it hasn't been okay to come together and to say, "I was afraid." It hasn't been okay to come together and to say, "I didn't know what to do." And so what ended up happening was people stood up and they started sharing about their experience. And there was one man that really stood out for me. And he said he'd been watching on the news, and given where his home was, he knew that the water was coming. So he did what he needed to. He went out, he got water, he got food, he brought it home. He lived in a 2-story house. He moved as much as he could in terms of furniture and things that were valuable from the first floor up to the second floor. He did everything he could. He brought an axe with him upstairs because he didn't know how high the water would go. And if he needed to get out through the roof of his house, he was ready to chop a hole in the roof of his house. And he said, "I had done all of this, and I looked out the window, and I saw the water coming. And there was nothing I could do. And the water kept coming, and there was nothing I could do. And the water kept coming. And I saw it in my neighbor's yards, and then it came into my yard, and the water kept coming." And I thought, what is that like? To watch something come that you're not able to get away from. And of course he was praying and he was using his practices, and nevertheless, he's watching it come. And it came into his house. and it climbed the walls. And he didn't know if it was going to come to the second floor or not. He didn't know when it was going to stop. He didn't know what he would have to do. All he knew was that the water was coming. And he shared that story, and he was one of the lucky ones, because it stopped. It didn't get all the way to the second floor, and it started coming back. He was one of the lucky ones. But he told that story and how helpless he felt as the water kept coming. And the reason that story touched me is because that story is not just his story, it's your story and it's my story. What are the things in our life that we can see coming, and we do everything we can, but we can't do certain things? And we can pray, we can do a lot of things, but the water keeps coming. Maybe it's a diagnosis. I'll come back to that. Maybe it's a relationship with somebody who's really, really important to us, and for whatever reason, it's just gotten so hard to talk to that person, and it's just, it's like that time in between where we can't say what we need to say, and the relationship, and we just see it disappearing around us. Or maybe it's the work that we're in, and even when we're in the digital world and technology and all of that, there's a time where, those jobs started getting outsourced, and people could just see the writing on the wall. It's like, my job is getting outsourced. My job is getting replaced. We're watching changes in our world, and we don't know what's going to happen next. And it's like the water keeps coming. And what do we do with that? And how do we open ourselves to a deeper level of resilience? So it's our story too. How do we open to that? In 2004, my dad was riding about 200 miles a week on a bicycle. So if you want to know what to do when you retire, he was out riding about 200 miles a week on a bicycle. And it was good, because it kind of kept him out of Mom's hair, and they had to figure out how to live together again. And they love each other very, very much, so I'm kind of playing with that. But anyway, so he's out 200 miles a week on a bicycle, but something really odd started to happen. Now, when you ride 200 miles a week on a bicycle, you're not just out there on a Schwinn, you're on a special kind of bike. So, he's got a bike with pedals and shoes that clip into it. So you're not only pushing down, you're pulling up. So, and he'd ride, and at the end of the ride, you have to turn your foot and unclip from the pedals. And so, it's a pretty simple thing to do, but he was starting not to have the strength in his feet to be able to do that. And so at the end of the rides, his dismount looked very clumsy. He was falling over. I'm like, Dad, that's not how it works. Something's not right here. So he got himself a physical therapist, and they started looking at what can you do. So there's a theme here. The theme is do what you can, not what you can't, right? So what can you do? So he gets a physical therapist, and he starts working with that. And it got a little bit better, but then it got worse. 2 years later, he was diagnosed with ALS.
Oh no.
Lou Gehrig's disease. The nerves stop communicating with the muscles, and the muscles begin to atrophy. And in the beginning, it's the extremities, and it's mobility, and then there's a wheelchair, and then you can't move your arms anymore, and then you can't feed yourself, and the water keeps coming. And it's not because we're not prayer warriors, and it's not because we did anything wrong. In fact, that's one of the things that Michael did, Unity of Houston, in that live stream broadcast. All the people that spoke, there was another man who stood up, and he said, my house is fine, and I feel bad, because there's so many people whose lives are just turned upside down. And you know, we're quick. We've read the books, we listen to the news, we learn this stuff, and right away people go, survivor's guilt. Friends, that does nothing to help support that individual. And what I saw Michael do was absolutely compassionate and perfect for the setting. And what he said was, this is a marathon, not a sprint. There's nothing you could do about that. And now you're in a place where you're blessed. So you're in a spot where you don't have to be taking care of your home right now. You can be helping other people. And you could just see his shoulders relax. You know, one of the other messages that Michael gave to his congregation was, it's not your fault. There's nothing you could have done differently. It's not your fault. And I think all of these are amazing little tidbits for how do we grow our resilience. How many times has the water kept coming? It's not our fault. One of the first things we do, it's human nature. I'm not saying it's spiritual nature. I'm saying it's human nature to take a look and to say, who can we blame? What happened? You know, even with my dad with ALS, it's like, well, what happened? How come I got this? It's natural to ask those questions. It's natural to look, and yet it does nothing for us. So letting go of that, finding ways to truly be resilient. Now, I brought something today as a prop. This helium balloon, right? Right? I think this is so important when we come to resilience. This helium balloon, how many of you when you were a little kid got a helium balloon and tied it to your arm? Did anybody have one get away?
Yeah.
Just about all of us, right? And we're standing there and we're looking at it, it just keeps going up and up and up. You know, it's like rise up. So how do we rise in the midst of the kinds of experiences that we're seeing in our country? And this is not new on the planet. We've seen these things before, but having so much of this so quickly back to back in our country. And to have some of it, and I'm not saying the stuff that's the natural disasters, to have some of this as a result of our own thinking processes. You know, no matter which side of the deal we're on, I'm not here to be political today, but we've got divided thinking about how to move forward with our country. So there are many, many places for us to find that resilience. How do we rise up? So one of the things that's there is to release as much resistance as we can. I think what Michael was doing with his congregation was brilliant. Allowing people to speak, sharing what's going on, doing it in a non-judgmental way, reminding us it's not your fault when the water keeps coming or the winds keep coming, you know? And we're in an interesting faith tradition in Unity, and I love our stories. I mean, oh my goodness. And of course, Myrtle Fillmore had tuberculosis, and she prayed her way into healing. She lived to be a beautiful old woman when there wasn't an expectancy for that to happen. And she did it through prayer. And Charles had a short leg, and as a result of the prayer and the work that they did, his leg grew. It was still a little shorter than the other one, but his limp receded. And so we've got these beautiful traditions where there's healing from our prayers as it relates to disease. What happens when it's not? Does our balloon still rise? Or do we start wondering if we did something wrong? What do we do with that? So this balloon, I wanted to remind us that what lifts us up, if we use this as a metaphor, our prayer, our gratitude lifts us up. And when events around us are heavier and stronger than what they've been in the past, it pushes it down. So all the praying and all the gratitude that we've done up until now, we might need to pray some more so that we can rise up. And so there might be new practices or practices that we've done before that we need to tune up and turn up so we can rise above. And to me, that's the faith component that I want to talk about today, is growing our faith. And it doesn't come from talking about it or thinking about it. It comes from remembering that you and I come from the one source. We don't just come from that, we are that. And yet, when we have the circumstances happening around us, it's so easy to feel pushed down. So what do? We bring in more gratitude. We bring in prayer that uplifts us. I love all the prayer that's being talked about on Facebook right now. But I also have to scratch my head. I'm sending you prayers for love and light. I wonder if that person actually sat down and prayed. Just saying. It feels good. It's nice. I like knowing that there are other people thinking about me. It's helpful. But I wonder, are we really sitting down and praying? Or walking and praying? There are many, many types of ways to pray, but are we praying in a way that it lifts us up? Are we dancing like David? Are we praying like David? Are we singing like David? You know, and when we can get it in our physical body as well as, our words, we feel it and it lifts us up. It's like more helium in the balloon. So now when the outer circumstances are what the outer circumstances are, we've got that awareness of God's presence inside of us, lifting us up. And it changes everything. And it allows us to be in whatever the experiences, the circumstances, the situations are in our lives, and we still feel uplifted. And we discover more of who we really are. So that the winds are blowing on the outside, and all this stuff is going on, we're discovering more of who we really are on the inside. How many of you, when you first came around Unity, you heard the idea of peeling an onion and bringing away, the parts that are not love and the parts that are not light? And, how long has it been since you've thought about that and thought about the next layer to peel and the next layer to peel and the next layer to peel? And so our faith is the trust that we're peeling away those layers and that God is stronger than anything outside of us. And to generate that means generating on the inside the feelings as well as the thoughts, so that we feel lifted up. Gratitude is an amazing way to do that. How many of you have kept a gratitude journal at some point in your life? I'm not going to ask who's still doing it. It comes and goes for me. I haven't kept a journal every day of my life. I started a different kind of practice with my gratitude journal, and I want to share it with you today. I call it 511. 511. So how many of you have kept a gratitude journal where you have like 5 things a day or 10 things a day? And, and it's good. It's good. This is different. On day 1, 5 things you're grateful for. Before you go to sleep, the day you start. 5 things you're grateful for. In the morning, you read all 5 that you wrote the night before, and you add 1. And in the evening, you read all 6 that you've written down, and you add 1. And the next day, you read all 7, and you add 1. And you do that for 30 days. And you end up sitting there reading 60 plus ways that you're grateful before you write down the next thing you're grateful for. And it changes the experience of a gratitude journal. Because it's like, it's accumulative, it's adding up. You start seeing patterns. You start noticing, yeah, there really is a lot of this. Has anybody had an idea? And I don't have as many people in my life as I used to have before. Or, my health isn't what I had hoped it would be by now. Or, fill in the blank. But you're sitting there reading that gratitude journal, and you're seeing all the good that's happening in your life. It changes the messages we give ourselves. It changes the way we feel about our lives and about each other. And it puts us in a place where we're more kind to one another. And it makes it be easier to be compassionate with one another. And as our vibration rises, as we rise up due to the faith that we have in how this all works, we actually generate more and more experiences that go to the next level. So I'm going to suggest we may have a new word that's about to be coined. I'm not sure Webster's going to pick up on this. I call it resilience. Yes. So as our faith deepens and we rise, it supports our resilience for what it is that might be happening around us. And when that happens, and we're generating that from the faith within ourselves, from the spirit within, everything changes. Everything. About 2 months before my dad passed away, I'll never forget the conversation. We had somebody that was in our home, Mom and Dad's home, and I was back there. I went back for this journey. And her name was Rosie. And she looked at him and she said, "I'm going to get you. I'm going to get your goat." And they were just kind of going back and forth and kind of playing, And he was just sitting there and he's like, not able to feed himself, totally dependent on everybody for everything else. And he's sitting there with this smile on his face, radiating. Like I'd never seen my dad radiate before. This is just an example. He had gotten to this kind of experience. And he looked at her and he said, "There's nothing you can do that's going to take this smile off of my face. There is nothing you can do to change that." And what I saw with him, and I've seen it over and over with so many different people through that last part of their life journey, is just becoming more and more and more radiant. And it's because of going inside and really calling on spirit in a way that has us rise up even more powerfully against whatever it is that's happening outside of us. And so, why wait? Why wait until the storms come? Why wait? We're in such a beautiful part of the country right now. We are so blessed here, even with our own issues. The ash is less than it was last time I was here. We're in such a beautiful part of the country. And so to bring these practices, gratitude, prayer, being kind with one another and compassionate with one another, and to let our faith support us in opening to greater resilience. I think that's the journey we're on. So rise up. God bless you.